Hello and welcome to the webinar of the Büchi automation system for kilo labs and pilot plants. I'm Erwin, and today I would like to talk about the advantages but also of the challenges our customers face when automating a reaction vessel. Especially in the development of active pharmaceutical ingredients, the move out of the research laboratory to the first production batch is a key step of the development process. This first production batch is typically done in a kilo lab or pilot plant with a batch size of 10 to 100 liters. This step is important, not only because it provides the first scale-up data for later full-scale production, but also because it provides the first material for clinical phase 1 and 2 trials, deciding about the future of a potential multi-billion blockbuster drug. Every chemist who is responsible for a kilo lab faces several challenges. First, as a chemical engineer, because the laboratory type synthesis of a drug product must be adapted to the more production-like technology of a pilot plant. Second, because of the 10 to 50-fold increase in batch size, process safety requirements increase substantially. And finally, since the product is used on humans in clinical trials, the strict and detailed qualification, validation, and documentation requirements of the health authorities must be fulfilled. All this must be considered when designing an automation solution for a kilo lab or pilot plant. Because the chemical production process is in its early stage of development, it is not well defined and prone to surprises. At the same time, the quick succession of different products does not permit the adaptation or optimization of the control software to each product. For some operations, working on an open reactor is unavoidable. Examples are sampling of reaction mixtures or seeding of crystallizations. Under this condition, a strict adherence to the ATEX regulations is mandatory. Finally, most documentation will be done on paper. However, if processes are run overnight, the data and event logging must be validated to comply to US CFR 21 Part 11. While the kilo lab automation faces challenges, this contrasts with some decisive advantages. Using automation, it is possible to combine the high flexibility of a human operator with the reliability and tirelessness of a computerized system. When designing a control system, it is therefore important to identify robust, reusable base operations which lend themselves easily to automation and focus on them. Other operations which require a high degree of variability are left to the human operator. It is important to understand that the robustness of the automation is not only defined by the sophistication of the software, but is heavily influenced by the used sensors and actuators. The reactor, the instrumentation and controls, the control hardware and software form a unit, and each part will contribute to the quality of the system. Since Büchi provides the complete setup from the reactor to the sensor and instruments to the controller hardware and software, we can deliver a well-balanced technical solution. Depending on the type of chemicals and solvents used, beginning with a volume of 10 liters, the design of a chemical reactor should comply to the ATEX standard. The preferred construction material for a pilot plant reactor is glass or glass-lined steel, because of their superior chemical resistance while being transparent. However, from an ATEX point of view, because glass is an isolator, electrostatic discharges can be an additional source of ignition aside from faulty wiring or mechanical sparks. While in large production-type vessels, the inside of a reactor can be kept completely oxygen-free, this is not always possible for small-scale reactors as used in a kilo lab or pilot plant. Solids are often dosed through the open handhole or the reactor is drained into an open flask. This places a kilo lab reactor into ATEX Zone 1, which is defined as an explosive atmosphere is likely to occur in normal operation occasionally. In order to improve the inherent safety of the reactor, all metallic parts of the reactor need to be grounded. In addition, glass parts can be coated with a conductive coating to reduce the risk of electrostatic discharges, and today even conductive PTFE gaskets can be supplied with the required food-grade certificates, which is important for pharmaceutical production. If reactions with hydrogen are planned, some of these measures are mandatory. For automation, this means that all sensors and valves, pumps, etc. must have the same or better ATEX rating as the whole reactor. While automation cannot mitigate the danger of electrostatic discharges, it can provide an additional level of safety by preventing or shortening the time where explosive atmospheres are present. The Büchi control system will execute a defined inertization process on the push of a button and will maintain a constant nitrogen overpressure inside the reactor, taking the burden of vigilance from the operator. If desired, it also can be easily extended to respond automatically to external alarm signals generated, for example, by hydrogen or solvent detectors. If a reactor is used to produce active pharmaceutical ingredients, the control system must comply to the requirements of electronic data acquisition, generally known as CFR 21, Part 11. While a full-blown computer system validation can be a long and expensive process, by focusing on the specific needs of a kilo lab, the validation can be reduced in scope and depth. For example, it is perfectly feasible to keep the lab protocols on paper and use the data acquisition only to read out missing data points for experiments running overnight. Since no external data storage is involved, validating such a system will be easy and does not require special expertise in computer system validation. Since the Büchi control system is based on a Siemens PLC, it can be extended with user access management, external storage, up to a full-blown data archiving system based on an enterprise-level database. Of course, Büchi will provide the required GMP installation qualification and operational qualification services if required. Functional robustness, ATEX compliance, and adherence to GMP standards are the three cornerstones of a successful kilo lab automation project. Büchi AG can provide a turnkey solution, and we are happy to design one which fits exactly your requirements.
Hello, I'm Fabian and I would like to show you our automation concept for Büchi reactors. The Büchi control system, also called BCS, is a modular-based system. Its individual functions allows us to automate almost any system. Thanks to the control system, complex process sequences can be conveniently and safely controlled and monitored via an operating panel. In addition to that, complex processes can be completely automated with a recipe control. Let me show you the BCS a little bit closer. Here we see a typical setup of one of our reactor systems. Normally the sensor values were visualized via a field display. Also the actors are manually controlled. With the BCS it's easy to automate a system like this. The individual functions are evaluated together with the customer. Afterwards, the functions from our function library can be combined, and at the end a customized program is created. Implemented in the BCS, the visualization could look like this. We have a thermostat control. The set point is referred to the internal process temperature, or alternatively to the check temperature. The motor is controlled by a frequency converter. The speed and torque is displayed next to the motor. With the 3 valves and the pressure transmitter, we can control the pressure and also do inertization cycles, fully automated. 2 dosing systems were used. The valve in combination with the scale gives the first dosing function regulated by mass. The second dosing function consists liquid dosing pump. The accurate dosing pump can calculate the total amount, which allows accurate dosing just with one equipment. Thanks to the flexible dosing head, the flow rate can be easily changed via the control system. The temperature probe on the top of the column together with the reflux valve allows a constant reflux. Now I would like to show you how to operate the control system. You'll see that thanks to the simple and logical structure of the interface, no long training or education is required to operate the system. On the main screen we have an abstract view of the system and all sensors and actuators. On the right side we have the navigation buttons. They allow to jump in the most used information. In the alarm menu, all active alarms or errors are shown with a description. Let's simulate a defective sensor. After the defect is detected, the triangle color changes to red and the error message displayed. Difference of a warning and an error like this is that the error have to be resetted after the system is fixed, while a warning will appear after the problem is solved. The history shows all past warning and errors and also some information which can be useful, like when you started a manual data logging. The protocol and trend menu is used to start a manual protocol logging or to check the measured values. The system has an internal data logging which logs the data in the background. So if you need a specific protocol for a test run, it's the easiest way to use the user protocol. You can give the protocol a specific name and choose the logging cycle. You also have to set a path where the protocol will be stored. If an ATEX panel is used, a USB server is installed in the control cabinet outside the ATEX zone. When the data logging is active, a symbol is shown on the screen. The measured values are visualized in the trend screen. To have a better view, you can zoom in by pressing the plus symbol. The enlarged graph is only extract and not live. In the settings menu, we can change some basic settings like time and date. Also, the brightness and language can be changed on this page. Next to the basic settings, system-specific settings can be made in the service admin area. Next to it, there is a small diagnostic menu which shows the status of the PLC and the router settings, which is set up to the integration of the system into a customer network or the VPN settings for remote maintenance. The service admin page serves a lot of different specific settings. I'll quick show you the most interesting settings. The sensor signals can be defined in the sensor signal menu. Next to the range, the linearity can be set wherever possible. Also, a fixed offset can be set. In the sensor limit menu, you can define a warning and error limit for each sensor. The converter menu allows to change the frequency converter parameters. The parameters should only be changed if the motor has changed. In the scale menu, the Siemens Sivarex scale can be adjusted and controlled. The system includes different access levels, which can be changed in the user administration. New users can be added in this menu. Depending on the security level of the user which is logged in, you only can add new user with the same or lower rights. For example, an operator can't create a new user with administration rights. You also could calibrate the touchscreen if necessary. The I/O menu allows to have a look at the specific connection of the PLS, and if needed, you also could force a signal. Let's do a typical test run with the control system to show how it works. We will simulate a mixing process which includes the inertization of the reactor and afterwards a dosing of two mediums. Stirrer and thermostat is also needed on these steps. By pressing on the motor symbol, we can start the stirrer and set it to 50 RPM. The same we do to start the thermostat. We'll heat the jacket up to 50 degrees. Before we can dose the material, we need an inert reactor. Because inertization is used on the reactor, we have to press on the reactor symbol. Here we see all functions which refer to the reactor and have more than one sensor actor. So let's set up the inertization function with 2 cycles. The vacuum should be 600 millibar. Afterwards, we'll flush the reactor with nitrogen up to 1050 millibar overpressure. After starting the function, the hand symbol indicates a running function of the reactor. Inertization cycle is now running and displayed in an information window. For a good mixing result, let's change the speed up to 100 RPM. Also, we do the mixing under vacuum. So we'll click on the reactor symbol where pressure control function is located. Let's set the vacuum to 700 millibar with a hysteresis of 20 millibars and start the function. In the next step, we need a bit of our liquid medium 1. So we click on the pump symbol and set the volume to 30 milliliters and the flow rate up to 100 milliliters. After starting the function, the dosing pump starts and will stop when the preset volume is reached. We now need the medium 2. This dosing function includes a valve and a scale. The reactor is loaded in load cells to get the white. The system will open the valve until the preset amount is dosed. So let's dose 5 kg relative into the reactor. After a little mixing time, we are finished with our process and have to stop all running functions manually. If this process is needed, for example every hour, it's kind of annoying for the operator to do these steps manually. Therefore, our recipe control is the best choice you can do. I'll show you now how you could set up the manually done process in our recipe control. First, we're going to the recipe window. On this page, we see the actual recipe which is loaded. Also, we have the editor for recipe and could import and export recipes. Let's write our own new recipe by clicking on the drop-down menu and click in the first empty line. The software will now generate a new recipe. Now we can click on the Edit button. At first we want to rename the recipe to Test. After changing, the disk symbol appears to show that the changes are not saved. Now we add our first recipe line. The BCS has a standard 3 parallel function and 20 steps per recipe. So first we'd like to start the stirrer. I have to choose which stirrer I would like to start. In our example we just have the one on the reactor. Now we have to say if the motor have to turn off or on. We turn it on with 50 RPMs. Next to the stirrer we also would like to start inertization at the same time. So let's put the inerting function of the reactor and do the same settings like before. Also we want to start the thermostat with a jacket temperature of 50 degrees Celsius. So the recipe control system would now start all these 3 functions and wait until every function is finished. So the stirrer and the thermostat function would be immediately ready, but the inertization function have to be finished until the control system goes to the next line. Next step would be to increase the stir speed and start pressure control. After the vacuum is generated, the system will go to line 3, where we start the dosing function with the pump. We choose the dosing volume function of the reactor and set the 30 ml with a flow of 100 ml per minute. Because we want to make sure that all material is in the reactor, I'll set the time with a few seconds delay. After that, we need the dosing with the scale. So we choose this function and set the parameters accordingly. So now our process is already finished. So we add a last line to make clear that the recipe is finished. The function program end will turn off all functions. Let's quick check every line. Well, that looks good. We now have to save the recipe. When it's saved, we can load the recipe into the system. Now we are able to run the recipe from the main screen. We now can start the recipe by clicking on the Start button. The system will now ask on which step we would like to start the recipe. This can be useful if you have to stop a recipe because of an issue and you don't want to start the recipe from the beginning. But now we would like to start the recipe from the beginning, so we let start step 1 and push OK. Now the function of line 1 of the recipe starts immediately. We can see that the stir and thermostat is on and the inertization cycle runs. On the bottom we see which function is already done by the green indicator and which is still proceeding. After the inerting function is done, the pressure control will start and the stir speed is increased to 100 rpm. After that, the dosing pump starts and the countdown of 30 seconds begins. Now the dosing valves open and the system dose until 5 kg is reached. Now we are already finished with the recipe. We could now do the same process again and again. With the recipe controller you're always sure that the process is the same quality and you won't have the human influences. It also gives you the chance to be more productive and you don't have to waste your time by pressing buttons on the control system. Feel free to contact if you have any questions for the automation system of Büchi.